Writing a book is never written in isolation. In fact, I would say it's a family affair. That leads me to this point. I once said some people have affairs, other people write books, because when you're writing a book, it really takes the whole family. Everyone is affected by it. And that's why today I have brought 2 members of my family, and I'm going to be introducing you to Margaret, who's my eldest daughter. She is going to be the person that's going to interview myself, and Colin, my husband, so that you can get a little bit of a feel for what it was like in our family as I transitioned into writing a book and becoming a writer. So over to you, Margaret.
Thanks for the introduction. I'm actually very excited to be speaking with you guys today, so no pressure. I have all the insights. I think, that's an excellent point you made. And I wanted to actually speak about the transition because you were doing corporate gifting. And yes, you were running your own business, so you kind of had an idea about that. And you guys worked together for a while. But I wanted to kind of speak about the transition into writing a book, becoming an author and a coach and a speaker. How was the transition, and how did you, both of you, feel the support? Was there support initially? I don't think there was, because it was a new experience for both of you. But how did you find that transition?
So for me, I originally started writing the book kind of like as a hobby. It was a dare from a friend. She said, just start writing. I think you've got a talent for it. And so I did, but I had to put it on top of the corporate gifting thing. And that was a big challenge, because where do you find the time? I was already working incredibly hard. Jerry Jenkins had written an article, and I had subscribed to his newsletter. Now, Jerry Jenkins is an international author. He is a bestseller. Some of his movies, his books, the Left Behind series, got turned into a movie. And I subscribed to his newsletter just that I could have someone else that understood the journey. And the one newsletter he sent through said, the loneliness ends today. I still feel emotional when I see that, because you are the only person that's got that vision. You can tell your family, and my husband has always been very supportive of whatever it is that I do. But being supportive and buying into the vision are 2 completely different things. So I had a little bit of a problem with insomnia. Jerry Jenkins used to write from 9 o'clock in the evening until 12 o'clock so that he wouldn't be removed from his family. I had insomnia, so I woke up very often at 3 o'clock in the morning. And John Maxwell had said that work always produces more results than worry. So I thought, well, I'm awake in any case, let me start. But then I got into the zone with the research and that kind of thing. And then I was starting to spill into the morning time. And that's when your dad was really important, because he did a flip and he started saying, fine, let me make breakfast for the children. Let me get the kids to school. We could do that because we were working together, so we had flexibility, but he adopted that role. And it was a very significant role for me because it stopped the interruption, but that was a big shift.
Yeah.
What can I say? I mean, Mom's already said it all. Look, in the beginning it was a little bit tough. I think the vision issue was very important. Not fully understanding exactly how writing books is actually going to bring in an income, and how it's going to sort of support the family role. But I think once that sort of vision was presented, it made a clear understanding. At least, let's put it this way, it created another vision of something that could happen in the future, something that could move forward and that could grow. So it was then just a question of taking up my role of helping out, doing extra things, and helping out and creating whatever support I could to help them to do that. Not always easy, Okay, a lot of frustrations, a lot of temperaments, a lot of uncertainties, and yeah, every now and again you still get to that point as, are we really doing the right thing? Okay, but I think just trying to stick to that vision and just continue moving forward, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, because it was a new journey for both of you. I actually love what you were saying about the supporting roles, and I wanted to speak about strengths and weaknesses, because both of you have your own strengths and weaknesses, and I think it played a big role in writing the book. I saw how you would ask Dad for support in advice more for some of your scenes in your book. If my character was stuck in the situation, what would he do? So how did you play around with your strengths and weaknesses? How does it work with you now?
So I've always been the creative person, and I just go full steam ahead in a certain direction. And then what I would do is I would read sections of the book to him, or have, particularly what you were speaking about, the one day I'd kind of written myself into a hole, and I'm like, or into a corner, and I don't know how to get out of this. And there were things that he would bring, a perspective that he would bring that was very unique. Now, he's got an attention to detail, but he's got quite a melancholic personality, which means that he sees faults where I don't want to see faults. And that usually annoys me, because I don't like it when people are pessimistic or find fault or all that kind of thing. But I had to say to myself, I'm writing for a reader, and they're going to be readers that are going to be like him. And so are there things about his personality which might be difficult for me that are going to help me with the reader? And when I had that shift, it made a big difference, because I could take feedback. He had to learn that my acceptance of feedback wasn't always instantaneous. I'd have to think about it, and assimilate it, and then kind of make me feel that it was my idea to start with. But there was one particular scene that was quite interesting. I needed to get a dragon egg from a place to another place, and they were very, very big. And I'd spent probably about 4 hours researching how archaeologists move things, and they had to build crates to fit around the thing, and I'd planned this whole thing, and then I read it to him, and he said, well, you can't do that. So I said, why not? I've done all of this research. This is the way that you move things. He says, but you told me that King Raldolph's men are looking for this egg. Now, to make this crate, you've got to chop wood and hammer nails. And don't you think that the patrol is going to come through and say, hello, what's going on over here? And then they're going to find your egg. So my whole plan was shot to hell. But when I thought about it, that does make sense. It's got to be quiet. So I said, well, what would you suggest? So he said, cowhide. You take cowhide, you put the egg in the middle, and you strap it up. And I said, but it's actually a very big egg. It's a dragon's egg. So he says, well, then you'd use 2 cowhides and stitch it together, or 4, but you can make it work. That way we have a rope, and you get the dragon to fly it out overnight. And I'm like, that works.
Yeah.
Because in those days, hides were normal. People used them for clothing. They used them for all kinds of things. So it was easily available.
Yes, that's lovely. So did you feel more involved in the process by helping with advice on the book?
Yes, a little bit of both, actually. One is, it was nice to understand what was going on. But then Mom would get to the points where she'd want me to read the book. And I said, but I've already read it because you read it to me. So, and I'm not normally a person that likes to reread stories over and over again. So I think that was a bit of a frustrating part. But it was nice to know that when she did read it, I was able to help and provide some sort of assistance now and again.
I resonate with that. I've read the books, but I heard the whole story when you were busy writing it. So yeah. Another question, and you kind of touched on it in the beginning, is how did you work on your relationship together? Because you work really early hours, and now you've got other clients in a book coaching aspect. So how do you work on your relationship while being so busy?
Sure. So from my perspective, it is about planning and being deliberate. And I have had other authors come to me and say, my wife or my husband says, it's all about the book, man. We don't do anything anymore. And I'm big on scheduling, so I like to schedule time to write, but I also say schedule time for your relationship. So for us, at some point, I had a schedule and when we would have private time together as a couple. And I said, this would be our day, this is our time. And then people say, that sounds so unromantic. And I'm like, yes, but the alternative is that you have days, weeks, months, and for some couples, years, where they go past where they never have any private time together. So scheduling it might sound a little bit boring to some people, but at least it produces the results that you can say, I have had private time. And whatever that private time looks for people, they might say, we're going to go hiking together, we're going to watch a movie together, whatever that private time is. And we had to get the children to buy into that as well and say, it is now mommy and daddy private time. So put on your earphones, watch a movie, do whatever it is, but this is our time as a couple.
Yeah.
I used to always say that we have a 24-hour business relationship because mom goes to bed at 8 o'clock at night, but she's up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then I'd work until about 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and then get up late. So we always, in some way or other, were able to complement.
And that's a good point because you were working together for years. I mean, there's very few moments I remember in my life living with you that you weren't working together. And there's a lot of challenges in that. I don't think many people can make it work. So how did you separate work from home life because you work together?
With difficulty.
With great difficulty. My parents worked together for a while and I saw the challenges on that. So, it could be like, the thing that happened at work today, you should have done this or you should have done that. There's someone that I follow, Alan Reyes from Reyes Corp, and he once said to me that he doesn't like to work with family businesses because the problems that you have at work, those are going to spill down into the dining room table. So one of the things that I implemented, and I know that you do this as well, is that when it's supper time, we say, what are the wins? What are the wins that we had today? What is our vision? So we're not discussing work. Sometimes some of it does spill in a little bit, but we celebrate that. And another tool that I really feel is important is when you are celebrating the person. So saying 3 things that you like about the person. Now, we haven't been very disciplined with that, but we have implemented it in our lives on several occasions. And when you're fighting with someone, now having to say something you like about them is extremely hard. And you're like, oh. But if you discipline yourself and you say, you know what, I really like the fact that you cook very well, or that you find those details in my book, that really helps. So, a funny story about you, which I've told to quite a few people. When I introduced this whole concept of saying, what do we celebrate about the person? You were still in primary school, and I said, now we're going to say 3 things that we like about each person in the family. And then you said, but I don't know what to do. Now, the school that you went to, there were a lot of divorces in that school. And so obviously you've been speaking to friends and they told you their little stories at home. And I said, okay, well, let's do this. And at the time, Dad was working in the automotive industry. He was a car salesman. And he had a habit of, as soon as he was going to leave the office, he would send me a message and he would say, I'm leaving now. And then I could plan. I could say, okay, well, we've already had supper, but I can make sure supper is hot for him. So when he comes in, he's got a comfortable, environment, nice warm dinner. That was my thinking. And then I said to you, what I really like about Dad, that he always lets me know when he's on his way home. And then you said, yes, because then at least you know he's not out having sex with other women. Like, what? I have to have a little chat to the school and ask her what the heck is going on at the school. But that little discipline of being able to center yourself and remind yourself why you fell in love with that person, what is the important thing for you, that helps to take you away from the conflict just momentarily and reset your relationship.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, and you can start seeing why you love the person. Is there anything from your side?
Well, I think very much the same. It's just a question of knowing that the difficult times are going to come through, and looking at the positive things within that period of time, and trying to find ways around that and focus more on the positive rather than on the negative. I think we complement each other fairly well there when it comes into to preparing things and having to cook and things like that. So we can both cook, we can both bake. Well, okay, one-sided bake. I can bake, but I think the roles are very important. Sometimes, you just need to understand that you just need to keep quiet and just let things move along. Otherwise, you waste all your energy in that infighting and argumenting and things like that. And there was a lot of that in the beginning. Okay, but as time goes by, you just learn that your energy can't be focused there. Your energy needs to be focused on the positive sides so that you can move forward. Otherwise, you just stagnate and stay where you are.
I wanted to actually speak a little bit about love languages and personality types, because I think with you two, you're very different and you have different love languages, different personalities. And so I know that you know a little bit about it. We've done some research and courses on it as well. Maybe you can just mention to both of you your perspective of, because every household's different. So how do you identify maybe how you can support your spouse in their love language, their personality type, so you don't get that aggravation with each other and support each other better?
So what I love about the love language, the way they explain it, is basically if I'm French and you're English, we could be saying exactly the same thing, but we're not going to understand each other. And that can cause a lot of frustration. So when you know what your love language is, then it makes it easier to understand your partner and to work in those areas. So for me, my love language is gifts. Sometimes I think that my husband is a little bit like that, but not so much. I'm more the gift kind of person. And also words of affirmation. And you'll often find that in the area of the love language, when your partner complains about something, it usually is a hint to what their love language is. So that old song, you don't bring me flowers anymore. That is usually an indication that the person has a gift as a love language, and so the partner needs to say, okay, to make my partner feel loved, go buy them as chocolate or some flowers or whatever. Sometimes there'll be cash flow issues where you don't necessarily have that. You might have to make something. And I think that that's also quite a difference between men and women. Men tend to struggle with lack of finances more than what women do, because they're wired to be providers. So particularly with COVID, there were a lot of people who used to be generous in gifts who couldn't be. And then you'd have to say, okay, in that season, is there something I can make that I can do and present it as a gift? And for me, because words of affirmation are really important to me, you'll often hear, if I'm speaking to someone and they're struggling, I will use my words to empower them. It means that I feel criticisms very deeply, and I feel negativity very deeply, and I will often become aggressive. If I'm going through emotional issues and someone starts noticing things that that need correction, I might react aggressively with that because I'm defending my psyche. So I've learned that my husband's love language is more physical. And, so like a lot of ladies will say, all men. But sexuality is not the same as a physical love language. A physical love language means that you'll touch, not because you're wanting as they say, to get lucky. You'll touch just because that is who you are, holding the hand, touching the shoulder. So that's not my love language. So I sometimes have to become more deliberate and say, when last did I just touch my husband? That has to be a discipline for me. So when you know that, then you can sometimes say, we're struggling a little bit, we're disconnecting. Can I just dip into what I know about love languages? Yes.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I think I'm also being a bit of an introvert. I like my own space. I like to do things on my own, things like that as well, which sometimes is a little bit difficult for mom, because mom likes to chat, she likes to talk, she likes to explain her experiences and things like that. And sometimes it's difficult because you want to get on and do things that you want to do, but you also know you're going to create a problem. So you rather just sit and listen and take in what happens. And then, of course, respond accordingly. So, I think it's a little bit difficult there's always going to be some difficulties. But once again, it's just a question of you need to understand where you're coming from and where the other person is coming from, and then decide, okay, how am I going to handle that? How am I going to deal with that to create an amicable situation?
No, definitely. Everyone's personalities are different. Everyone's relationships are different. I know in my marriage, we're lucky. We both like acts of service. So he'll wash the dishes for me because I hate doing that. But I also do touch as well. But he's not a touch person. So I'll be like holding his hand. I'm like, come give me a kiss. He's like, this is annoying. But yes, it's definitely a perspective. I wanted to quickly touch about legacy, because you've mentioned before that you're trying to create a legacy with your book. So what is your vision? You also mentioned vision. What is your vision for your legacy, and how are you working towards that together?
So originally, when I started the book journey, Dad was, as I say, supportive, but he was still like, I don't know what the heck's going on over here. Do I even recognize this woman? And as I said beforehand, some people have affairs, other people write books. It's like a big adjustment. But I belonged to a Facebook group called 20 Books for 50K. Mm-hmm. And basically the founder of it said, what would retirement look like for me? How much money would I need in order to retire? And he worked out that if he had retired in New Mexico, he would need $50,000 a month to make that work. Mm-hmm. And then he said, how many books would I need to sell? So they worked out that if you had 20 books and you were selling X amount per day for those books. Now, obviously, that requires a marketing plan. Some people go into writing books and then they have no plan whatsoever and they can't understand why it's not working out. You do need a business and marketing plan. But that was worked around retirement. And both Dad and I didn't have a retirement fund. So we're like, what's going to happen one day when we are too old to be able to work at the same level as we are now? You have to be realistic. Your body can't continue like that forever. Then that meant that royalties would become very important. But in terms of legacy, besides building up that kind of nesting, and it has to be built up, you have to look at it as, if I was saving for retirement, it wouldn't happen overnight. I would have to gradually do increments. And so that's the same way that books work, is they grow over time. They don't happen like in 5 years kind of thing. But more than that, I have got 3 different children with very unique personalities. Originally, I started the book based on my middle daughter, your sister Nadine, based on her kind of personality. And then I thought to myself, if I wrote a different series for each child, I could leave the royalties of those books to those children. Now, you can do that for up to 70 years, depending on which country you get. The book royalties can be passed on to family members. And I believe that would be my legacy for my children. That because each book was based on their kind of personality, I was celebrating who they were. and then they would also be able to get the money from that. But it also requires training each person on how to manage that business, whether they are going to do it themselves or they're going to hire a manager, to actually understand how the business works so they can see what's happening and make sure that it grows.
That's brilliant. I read a stat earlier, just before this interview, that 97% of people who start writing books actually don't finish it. And they've had a list of reasons why. And one of them was support. So this question is for you, Dad. How do you think, if you were speaking to someone who's a spouse or a partner or a friend or whatever, who's starting a book, how would you say that the partner or the friend should support that person? Or what ways and tips do you have for that?
I think the advantage we had was that we were already working together. So that created a strong bond or approach in which we were working. So there was a systematic approach. People who are just starting out totally from scratch, I think would be a little bit more difficult. But the important factor is, I think, that both need emotional support from both sides. And both spouses need to understand each other's love language. I think that came through very clearly. And understand exactly how much can I involve the person or not involve them. Because there are times, as you know, I train, I facilitate, I coach. And that sometimes sort of creates that separation between what Mom's doing and what I'm doing, because then that's when we totally go our separate ways. But in the times that I am working, I need to understand that I need to support her, because there are things that she has to do, that she has to put things together, which creates a lot of frustration and tension for her. And I've got to find ways in which to relax her, make it more easier for her. And I think from that basis, once again, I think it's just that spouses need to learn to understand each other. They need to understand what support they can give to each other and to what extent they can give that support without, of course, breaking down what they are doing as well and taking away from their individualities again. So you need to create that sort of, not barrier, but yeah, that support mechanism, if you want to put it that way. But once again, I think the most important thing, which is most probably the most crucial thing in any marriage or any organization working together, is communication.
Yes.
You've got to get the communication right, and the communication is a two-way street. It's not a one-way street. So the two-way street means I'm going to give you information, but you're going to have to understand where it's coming from. And then you've got to respond accordingly, and vice versa. So I think the communication is a very, very important.
Yes, definitely. And as we round off, Mum, do you have any tips for new authors who don't know how to navigate the partnership?
Well, one of the things that I do want to say is just about children. Children also, if you're married and you've got younger children, your children are going to feel the lack of attention. So one of the things that we did is that we got the kids to buy into the whole thing, and we'd say this is what the goal is, and then you can choose what it is that you want to do when I've printed the next book. And the kids are quite strict about it. I diverted once, and I did a non-fiction book, and Nadine came through. She picked up the book. She said, "What is this?" I said, "It's a book that I wrote for authors." She says, "That wasn't part of our deal. This is the book that is supposed to be printed because I am wanting to go on my activity." So you'll find that if you get everyone's support, they'll hold you accountable and they'll steer you in that right direction, and you can actually make it work.
Hopefully those 97% of people pick things up because they watched your video. Thank you so much for your time, and you can close off, Mama.
So thanks, Margaret, for joining us today. Thank you for watching, and please remember to subscribe, so that you can see what's next on the list for authors.